So thank you so much to the both of you for being here. So both of you didn't start your careers as preachers. Irie, you started off in banking and criminal justice, as what I understand, and Kamilah, you started your life as a lawyer. What led the both of you to be church planters? Irie, you want to go first?
Oh boy. Let's see. I would say I want to sort of respond to the way you wrote the question to me specifically. You mentioned that you're a pastor, you're a teacher, a writer, a social worker, among other professions, right? Spanning really a 40-year period. What led you to be a church planter, right? And how I like to answer that, because people often ask me, or they say, you know, you're everywhere. You do this, you do that. Where I am in this season of my life, I would say that, like, I didn't plant a church on top of all of that. What I have learned to do is to blend all of my doings into becoming what I consider a spiritual entrepreneur. In other words, so I have made my gifts, my talents, my expertise, and experiences available to God and the universe in an effort to make life better for others. And so I'm open to, I try to be open to the Spirit and where I sense the Spirit leading me in any given time. And so when we started talking about the gathering, it actually flowed out of some conversations that we were having with Reverend Kamilah's husband, actually. The three of us were sort of in transition, and Kamilah can tell you more about her specific piece of that, but we were in transition of trying to find a church where we felt like we fit and we were spiritually nourished and that spoke to our concerns for social justice. And so we were actually attending a particular church, and Kamilah's husband, Nick, would often look over it and say to me, why don't you go be Moses and plant a church? And I would look back and like, I'm not interested in that. And if we did anything like that, it would not be me. And so he mentioned also this idea of having a 1 hour service. And so probably about 2 years later, after some resistance and some other things sort of fell in place, the gathering was planted. It was not originally supposed to, we weren't thinking about a church. We were thinking about a community, a gathering where the community could experience womanist preaching. And it just sort of, the community that began gathering really made it clear to us that they were interested in a church. So that's kind of how it started. Kamilah?
Well, for me, as you said, I started my life as an attorney. That's the only thing I ever wanted to be since I was 7 years old. And never did I imagine I'd be a preacher, a pastor, and definitely not a church planter. I was not interested in any of that. It's a series of, I guess, yeses to God is how I feel, is how I ended up right here. But even the yes to call to ministry, leaving my good paying job to go to seminary. And, the yes to call to ministry, the yes to, then I came to Dallas to pursue a PhD. So I'm working on my PhD in biblical interpretation at Bright. So that's what brought me to Dallas. And my husband's family is from Dallas. And so the yes to a lot more time of school after I said I would never go back to school. And because this is where I feel like I was called to do. And then here, as Irie was saying, trying to find a place where I felt I could worship and be, nourished, as she said. And here in Dallas, it was no place that really felt like, you know, this is where me and my family would need to be or would want to be. And like, you know, again, piggybacking off her, it wasn't even the idea, even doing this wasn't the idea of planting a church. It was what would happen if we created space for womanist preaching, for people to hear more womanist preaching. Because after we did the first 7 last words, with 7 womanist preachers, they people were asking for more womanist preaching. And so the question then became, how do we get a space for people to do that and experience that? And, you know, as Irie said, she wasn't interested in planting a church. I wasn't interested in planting a church, and definitely not by ourselves. But the idea was, when we first started out initially, it was 3 of us. And so the idea that there would be 3 people who could manage the load seemed more realistic, even with the idea of just creating space, because even in creating space, it takes time, it takes energy, it takes planning. And I was working on a PhD. And I'm still working on a PhD. But even with,
and you're a mom and a wife,
right,
and you're partnered up, you know, yeah,
right, you know, and as my daughter likes to joke, and my 40 cousins, you know, so just life, period. So the things of life, and so trying to figure out how this would be a way of it working, where you should live and not die, even in doing it. And so, you know, when we agreed to start it, like she said, you know, we started out with the idea of creating space. And so we planned it and we prayed about it. And the first Saturday, people showed up. And I was like, okay. And the next Saturday, people showed up. And every Saturday since then, people have showed up. But it wasn't until, because we started in October, and it wasn't until, because we started out in a fellowship hall, because this wasn't church. So we created just a space in the fellowship hall. But on the first Saturday of December, the church had already rented out the fellowship hall for another event. So they were like, you'd have to move in the sanctuary. And I really didn't want to move in the sanctuary, because again, this wasn't church, and I didn't want people who were coming to feel uncomfortable, because a lot of the people who were coming to our service and who still come are people who have been hurt by church. So the idea of being in church, I didn't want to re-traumatize them. And so, but we went in, and the people they loved it. And so that's when we became church.
Yeah. I want to add something to what Kamilah was saying about, she mentioned the 7 last words. So the 7 last words, 7 last words, or 7 last sayings of Jesus from the cross, is a event that occurs primarily, I would say, or traditionally in Black church. And it occurs on, are you familiar with that, Nadine?
No, I'm not. Please fill me in.
Okay, and it occurs on Good Friday. And so what happens typically is there's 7 pastors or 7 preachers that preach each of the 7 last words of Christ from the cross. And so we were, looking at that and thinking about that, and wondering what would it look like if we had 7 Black women, because traditionally it's always 7 men, or they may have 1 woman in there, but rarely. And in Dallas, had never seen 7 Black women doing that. And so we organized that, and it was actually held at an at an open and affirming white congregation in Dallas, Midway Hills Christian Church. And so the place pretty much packed out, and it was incredible. And so and people after the service were like, and so it was 7 Black women, the 7 sayings for 7 minutes. So each of us had 7 minutes to preach. And most of us, tried to stick within that 7 minutes, but you know how that is. But after that is when we started getting all these inquiries. And so, we just kind of paid attention to those kinds of things, right? Those kinds of responses. And then we would go various places individually and preach or speak. And again, we would still get this same question. Where can we hear some more of this? And so paying attention to those kinds of things. And then Reverend Kamilah talked about the church where we have our services. And when we talked and agreed that, all right, let's do this. We knew that we did not want to have concerns of mortgages, because our focus, we wanted it to be on ministry and on a certain kind of ministry. And so what we began looking for was somewhere, a church, a Disciples of Christ church, that could give us what we called permanent nesting space. And so I sent an email to the North Texas area minister and asked him to send that email, that request, to the North Texas area churches. Within several hours, we received 5 responses saying, yeah, come to our church. But we had in mind a particular church that we wanted, that we felt like would be best for this ministry. We wanted it to be centrally located in Dallas, where people had access to transportation and things of that nature, which was Central Christian Church, right? And I would say it took about 2 weeks for Dr. Ken to reach out and confirm. But when he said yes, that again was another affirmation, because that's what we're looking for, right? Because we want, we want God's approval. We want Spirit's approval, and we want to know that to sense that we are moving in a good direction. And so when those kinds of things happened, that was affirmation for us.
Okay, so this actually ties in really great to my next question. So the gathering describes itself as a womanist church, but not everybody is familiar with that term. How do each of you define womanism?
I'll go ahead and leave the scholar to go last. So let me begin like this. Everyone interprets the Bible through a certain lens, whether we admit it or not, or whether even we know it or not. What I've discovered, and I'm sure you have too, is that we bring all of who we are to our study and interpretation of the biblical text. That is what we've been taught theologically, what we believe about the Bible. And I say what we've been taught theologically, what we believe about the Bible, because the two may not be the same, right? We may have been taught some things theologically, but may not necessarily believe them. But we bring our biases, we bring our experiences, etc. So as a theologically trained Black woman who identifies as womanist, what I'm simply doing is naming the lens through which I do theology and ministry, and quite frankly, life, right? So we're naming that. So I wanted to say that first, because often I think when people see womanist church, or when they see womanism, they get a feeling that like we're doing something, well, we are doing something that no one else is doing, in a sense, because we named it, we put it out there, but everybody has a lens, right? So I thought that was important to say. But as far as the definition of womanism, I consider it an embodied framework or methodology that, and to quote Dr. Mitzi J. Smith, that privileges the voices, traditions, concerns, and experiences of Black women, as opposed to the voices, traditions, concerns, and experiences of, say, white males, right? Because traditionally, that's how we've all read scripture. That's how we've understood it. And so when we think of theology and biblical interpretation, they've been held hostage by the white male gaze and the white male perspective, right? But that's just one way of doing theology, not the only way. Womanism declares Black women's theologizing and scholarship is valid, and more importantly, necessary for the survival and wholeness, and I would say well-being of all God's creation. So that's how I would define it.
And I would take it even a step further, because even outside of our theology, womanism is about our lived experiences and how we are communal about the community and the survival and fitness of all people. But womanism is grounded in the experiences of Black women and taking Black women's experiences seriously as a valid starting point. However, because we're concerned about the survival of all people, it's not just about Black women.
That's right.
And so, but for me, womanism, it's a lens in which I interpret the Bible, but it's also my lived experience. It's also how I try to live out my life in helping liberate all people. And so for me, womanism, as a womanist church, yes, we are interpreting the text from a womanist lens, but we're also trying to liberate all people through our preaching, through the way we stand, through the ways that we engage in issues of injustice and trying to seek justice, and the way we put our bodies on the line for certain things, and the ways that we spend our money. It's all this is wrapped up in, for me, in how we do what it means to be a womanist.
Ditto what she said for us. Yes.
Yeah, because it's womanist, and it started out in the academy, and I believe one of the things that we are trying to do is make womanism accessible to more people to understand. Because for me, when I learned the term womanist, it was what I'd been my whole life. I just never had that terminology.
And for me, it wasn't what I did my whole life, but it was what my soul was in desperate need of. And so and I know this is another part of your question, another question that you're going to ask, but I came to womanism when I was a seminary student at Bright Divinity School, and had experienced, some success professionally, but emotionally, and even spiritually, I was not free in terms of who I believed I was, and my capabilities and my worth and my value. It was all wrapped up in a patriarchal kind of Christianity that was suppressive. And so when I experienced womanism, what I say, it saved my righteous mind. And so for me too, it is a way of doing life. It is a way of being that I believe can transform our church.
The world.
And the world, yeah.
So Kamilah, did you also feel like what led you to womanism was academia?
Yeah, actually, I learned the terminology in seminary as well. I was taking a Hebrew Bible class, and Hebrew Bible interpretation, and that's where I learned about womanism. And it was like, okay, well, that's what I am. That's what I've always done. And not only me, this is how my mother was. This is how I grew up. In a very communal sense of seeking liberation for everybody. And also a communal sense of trying to make sure it's still liberation, but make sure everybody's okay too. But, and it was just the realism, because before then, you're familiar with the term feminism. You've heard feminism before. Yeah. But that's not really what I am. This is really what I am.
So for the both of you, was it kind of like a no-brainer? Like when we start the gathering, it's going to be a womanist church. Like it's going to be based in this theology.
Well, I mean, we knew we were going to be grounded in womanist preaching and womanist interpretation, but it was never supposed to be a church in the first place. So, but once it became a church, well, if it's going to be a church, it'll be. But it was Irie's idea to name it as such. I mean, because for us, we were operating as a womanist church, but to name it, and it's interesting because when you name it as such,
yes,
then we already got people questioning us because like 3 Black women, really? And then to say womanist, oh, well, can men still come? Or is this you get all those type of things. And it's like, it's interesting because we've named it as such that this invokes certain things in people. Whereas you don't necessarily ask some of these questions of other churches that just have church in the name.
Right. And I think that's a real good point. I'm glad you mentioned that, Kamilah, because I was thinking about that this morning, that had we just named the church The Gathering, even with 2 or 3 women pastors, it would not have caused, you might not be interviewing us, right? But because we named it and I forgot that it was my idea. I didn't remember that. But we want it to be, because we're trying to, as Kamilah said, and we are doing this, we are making womanist thought more accessible by some other things that we've done. Putting the name there was important for doing that, for making womanism accessible, even for generating questions so that we could have conversation and dialogue about what it is. It's a way of educating the community. But also, I think it's a way of being forthright and letting people know up front that this is what we're about. This is what we're about. And not being afraid to do that, right? But having the courage to even experience some opposition, some questioning, but I see it as always opportunities for education and enlightenment.
And also, with the whole naming it of it, even coming out initially with our priorities.
Priorities.
Our priorities. And the thing, when we come out and you explicitly say, the things that we're for, you recognize that there's going to be a lot of people that's not going to come with you.
Right.
And that's okay. Just in the same thing, because we said it's a womanist church. Now, there are people who won't like it, who don't even know what womanist is, but won't like it because we put that name in the title.
Right.
And that's okay, because they'll learn eventually.
Yeah.
So I'm going to skip forward, actually, because I feel like this question that I'm going to ask ties into what you said, Kamilah. So you had said that womanism, and at least your approach to it, is you want to liberate all people. I mean, you want to make it accessible to everyone. But it doesn't change the fact that womanism or womanist theology is rooted in the Black female experience in America. How do you then navigate the power dynamics of having a multiracial, mixed gender congregation? And then the second part of that, and I can repeat it later on, is how does this inform what you preach from the pulpit?
Well, both. For me, I'll say, I'll start with your second question, I think, and back into your first one. Because we are interested in the liberation of all people, we are often preaching issues about marginalized people, because we are, as Black women, marginalized people in these all but United States. And so a lot of our topics are dealing with justice issues, although right now we're talking about money. But we've talked about all types of things, not just justice issues, but issues that are impacting people and their lives, and issues that are going to impact you, whether you're Black, white, red, gay, or straight. These are issues about money, issues about domestic violence, issues about, I'm trying to think of what else we preached this year. My mind is kind of going blank. But certain things that we've preached about, these are issues that are issues across the board. Now, they may impact Black women more so then they impact some other people, but they still impact people. And not only that, because we're talking about a communal and trying to teach a communal spirit, if it impacts me, whether it impacts you directly, it should impact you because we're part of the community. So trying to get an understanding that it's not an individual experience, it's a communal experience, and a communal healing is going to need to take place. And as far as your first question, can you repeat it? Because I kind of think I remember, but I want to make sure I'm answering.
Sure. Okay. How do you navigate the power dynamics of having a multiracial, mixed gender congregation?
See, our church is the other thing is we have a non-hierarchical organization. So that's the other thing about the gathering. There is no senior pastor. We're co-pastors. And so the idea that we're trying to eliminate patriarchy and hierarchy, not only in the world, but in the church, we navigate that by modeling this is how we want to live life in a communal, non-hierarchical manner. And if there's no hierarchy, then we can get rid of some of these power dynamics. And recognizing that there are still issues, we still are centering the experiences of Black women when we start. So we're still speaking from our own experience.
Nadine, can you unpack just a little more what you mean when you say navigate the power dynamics of having a multiracial mixed gender church? What are you trying to get at there?
I'm glad you asked, because I struggled with forming this question. Because I will be upfront. I pass as white. I'm half white, half Asian, and so I have a foot sometimes in both worlds. And so this is something I struggle with as well. So being upfront about where you're coming from, should have done that from the beginning. I apologize. So there's this. Okay. I guess what I'm asking is, if you're a womanist, you're a Black woman in America.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, okay, well, I have some white people in my congregation. I have some men. I have to now change what I originally wanted to say so that it also includes them. Do you ever feel like you have to censor yourself or change it so that it can be applicable to everyone? Do you ever wish that, like, I wish I could just preach to Black women and period? Like, why do I have to make it accessible? Accessibility has been a huge fight for a long time for a lot of people, but sometimes when you are in a minority or in a oppressed community, it's like, why is that burden on us that we have to make it accessible for everybody? It should be the other way around. That's why we have to have our own community. That's why we have a womanist church, because we've not been made to feel welcome in the traditionally white male church. I guess that was the real question behind that.
Okay, I get it now. The answer to that is nope. And that is the beauty for us, and I think for others, for the white people, for the Asian people, for the Black people who come to the gathering, is that we don't censor what we say. We preach and we lead and we do ministry authentically. And so we don't feel that pressure to censor what we say because we don't want to hurt white people's feelings who are sitting in the congregation, the white women who are in the congregation, right? No, that's another reason for the gathering a womanist church.
Right.
So look, this is what our social justice priorities, lay it out. We have 3. And the first one is racial equity. So that means we're going to be talking about racism. We're going to be talking and preaching about white privilege and white fragility, right? We're going to be preaching about white nationalism and white supremacy. All those are evils. And so we're going
to, and they exist in the church.
Yes, yes. So that is the freedom, Nadine, that we have. And that's one of the reasons for me why I knew the traditional church is no place for me in terms to pastor. I've done it, and I didn't feel that freedom to speak truth to power as I sensed I needed to. Reverend Kamilah?
Yeah, I agree. I think the naming of it, like she said, makes a big difference. Because for me, anybody who comes across the gathering, however they come across the gathering on social media and things like that, if you go to our website or if you come, I think like we're very clear. There's no sleight of hand of what you're going to get. Like you know up front what this is going to be about, how we're going to be. But when people come, they all say, you know, they never felt more welcome. They feel so welcome, even, you know, and we have quite a few white people who come to the gathering and come faithfully every week.
Every week.
And
frankly, it's amazing to me because I'm so appreciative of it and grateful for it, and it gives me so much hope for the church.
Right.
Because if they can sit there and listen to this, what we're saying, and then have conversations about it when they go home, read the text before, because we send out every week, we send out the scripture and a little snippet about what we're going to preach about. Oh, the other thing that has really been helpful, Nadine, that we have after every sermon that we preach, we have what we call talk back to the text. So we'll preach, we'll sit down, moment of reflection, then the preacher will come back and entertain comments and questions from the congregation about what they just heard. Oh, we have some rich conversations. You know, and so that helps people to feel like their voices matter. All people, everybody who's in there, because everybody can say something and ask something, right? And is respected and is not judged or made to feel like their question was stupid or something of that nature. And sometimes the questions are a critique of what they heard us preach, but that's welcomed as well.
Yeah, I was led to the disciples because I was raised Roman Catholic, because there was a local congregation where I was living a few years ago that had that similar structure where there's an open floor and you can respond to what the pastor said. And she was a woman. She had a shaved head, so that was huge for me initially. And she died according to the liturgical calendar, which was great. But yeah, I mean, just having that ability to, like you said, breaking down that hierarchical structure so that you can have that one-on-one in a space, you can respond, because a lot of times, a lot of people's experience is you sit there passively taking this information and then you kind of, okay, I'll go now, you know, unless you're the kind of person to go to Bible study, and a lot of people don't do that because that's a little much. So I want to build on that.
Before you go on that, though, but even with, you know, people who, if you sit in a church and you hear this, and even if you go to Bible study, a lot of these churches, you're only allowed to go by that pastor's interpretation. So the interpretation that he or she may say, and then when they come to Bible study, this is the interpretation. This is the one that a lot of people are trained. And so the difference in the gathering is we are upfront that this is the way we're interpreting it. There are other ways to interpret text. Although, you know, and as she said, sometimes the questions or comments may be a critique because maybe the person does interpret it differently than we do. And that's okay. And so to welcome that kind of freedom is different.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, going to skip ahead because I feel like this dovetails really nicely. So I noticed on your website, and then also based on what you said, Kamilah, on this, trying to get away from this traditional hierarchical structure. So your website says it refers to members as ministry partners. So I'm wondering if that's intentional. Has your church done away with formal membership, as some other churches have done? If so, why? And then has it created better community for the people at the gathering or of the gathering? And I can repeat those questions later.
Yeah, we were intentional not to have members. We have ministry partners because we say we believe that we're partnering in the work together. And so to be a ministry partner at the gathering means that someone comes regularly, whether they're in the sanctuary or we have quite a few ministry partners who do not live in Dallas, but they watch us online faithfully and they engage online. So also we ask that our ministry partners share their gifts with the community. Now that comes in a wide range. It could be someone making communion. It could be someone singing. It could be someone writing litanies. It could be someone working in technology, but it's us all working together for our community. And then we ask that they give regularly to support the ministry of the gathering. So those are the three things we ask our ministry partners to do. Now, another thing about the gathering, which is unique because we, as you know, we meet on Saturday. There are a lot of people, quite a few people who come to the gathering every week who are ministry partners, but some of them still go to a traditional church on Sunday. Yeah. And that's fine, but there are quite a few who only go to the gathering. Mm-hmm. And to be clear, not all churches are okay with you having a dual membership. Let me say that. So they may not be okay with you saying you're a member here, but that's not why we don't say we're members, because membership it's a different thing than what we're trying to build. We're trying to build community. So to partner is to do something different. But see, our ministry partnership goes beyond just individual peoples. We also partner with other organizations and things, because if we're going to we recognize that this is a small gathering of people, and we're not, but although there are a lot of issues in the world, we can't address them all, but some of the things that we want to do, people are already doing that work, so we don't have to start from scratch. So we can partner with other churches, other organizations, and do things together. For example, when we were doing our food justice sermons, Friendship West has a community garden that they give out fresh fruits and vegetables to anybody they want to. Whoever comes, you just come with a bag on I think it's the second or the third Saturday of the month. So we partner with them to go volunteer and hand out those vegetables and work with them in those type of things. That's work that needs to be done, but we don't have to start from scratch. So ministry partnership for us, it goes beyond just the individual people.
Yeah. I would add this about the ministry partnership. We're discovering that people need to learn how to be in ministry partnership, right? Because as you said, so often they're used to coming to the church, joining like a club, giving their money, maybe, and going home. Mm-hmm. So they're not accustomed to this notion of partnership. And so we, Reverend Kamilah and I think we model partnership quite beautifully, I might say. And so they see our partnership. They see that it's not a hierarchy. They see that the different roles that Reverend Kamilah and I have sort of grew organically. We've discovered, I do this well. And I like doing that, that kind of thing. And so it's a slow process of helping people feel comfortable with recognizing and availing their unique gifts to this partnership. Also, there is this added component of partnership of responsibility and accountability, right? Membership doesn't necessarily put you in a situation of accountability and responsibility, right? And so when we invite people to ministry partnership, we also give them like an online sort of questionnaire where we're asking them, what do you bring to the table that you would like to share with the gathering, with this community, with the larger community? And then it causes them to think about that, because up front, we want them to know, we don't want you to just show up and just open your brain and have us pour stuff in it. We want community. And you are important, and what you bring is important, and what God has gifted you with is important and necessary for community, for the survival and wholeness of this entire community, which is a womanist tenet.
Okay, I'm gonna switch gears a little bit and kind of go back to, I guess, why we're having this conversation. So Women's Equality Day is on August 26th, so next Monday. And it was established to commemorate the passing of the 19th Amendment, which was supposed to grant American women the right to vote in 1920, I think. A little different here in Canada. Obviously, this largely applied to white women, as women of color had to wait years before they could cast a ballot. How do you think womanism contributes to equality, or let's say equity or inclusion, in the 21st century?
I think womanism is a way of saying, or a way of not waiting for someone to invite you to the table, but to create your own table. So this idea of being able to create your own space, your own, and to privilege your own way of thinking about life and thinking about ministry, is what it means to be free. And equality is about being free. Is about being free to exercise your rights as a human being. And so I think womanism is a way for Black women to experience freedom. Freedom to be all that God has created and crafted us to be. And I can't see equality without freedom. Just one thought.
I agree with Irie. I really.
And womanism isn't, as Reverend Kamilah said earlier, womanism is not just about Black women's freedom, right? It is about dismantling, resisting every oppressive structure that prevents people from flourishing. And so it has everything to do with equality. That's why it was birthed. That's why Katie Cannon and Jacqueline Grant and Dolores Williams and Kelly Brown Douglas risked putting forth this notion, this idea, this methodology, this framework, this way of being, in the, years ago, 20, 30 years ago, because of this lack of equality, right?
I want to go to something that you said that stood out to me. So you said womanist theology allows Black women to create their own table, their own space, because you're not waiting to be invited to the table or to the space. But then how does that tie in with disciples' identity, where it's a movement for wholeness in a fragmented world, and they have such a stated, at least, commitment or dedication to this idea of unity? That's something I personally struggle with, because I'm not, I wasn't born and raised a disciple. It seems to be such this pattern that repeats itself over and over again. How do you reconcile those two?
Well, I'll say two things. The interesting that is part of the disciples thing, the moving for a fragment. But the other thing that many disciples love to bring up is the fact that each church has its own autonomy.
Yes.
And that's a real big thing with disciples churches. But here's the thing. With my idea of us, the gathering is no longer waiting for space to be created, but creating space that we believe is necessary so people can hear this type of preaching and experience this type of worship community. So you create the space, which is a womanist move. However, we're still tied with disciples. We come to the table every Saturday, just like all the other things. You can still have your own table at a picnic. So we got our own table, but we're still part of the party.
That's right. Well said. We got our own table, we still part of the party. Yes. We were intentional about remaining disciples.
Right. Yeah.
Communion is, which is not the only, disciples profess to being a pro-reconciling, anti-racism church. We are definitely an anti-racist church, right? Pro-reconciling, right? But there's some things that we understand as Black women about reconciliation that inform what we do. I'll just leave it at that, right? So what makes us disciples, we're still connected, and we were intentional about that, about remaining thus. We participate, we're engaged in the larger church, we attend General Assembly, we attend National Convocation, we come on and we talk to you, and we just, we go to these events, we're part of committees and things of that nature. So I think the way Kamilah said it is perfect.
Yeah, and it'll make for a great tweet at some point.
Yeah.
But I'll credit you. Don't worry about it.
Thank you. Please give me my credit at Kamilah MH.
Copyright, registered, trademark.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep on going.
Now I've got just 5 minutes. I've got another conference call.
Gosh. Okay. I think this is the last. There's only 2 more questions.
Okay.
Because you only have 5 more minutes, I will choose one of the 2. So from your perspective, what is the future of womanism?
I see womanism expanding. I see a lot of innovation and increased creativity in its expression. Womanists aren't monolithic. There are all kinds of ways that womanists express our identities and who we are in our ethics. And so I see more of that, particularly as it relates to millennial womanists. And I see people becoming more and more enlightened and educated about womanism. And particularly as we see, as we look around and we see Black women, period, in key places, I mean, we've got an African American general minister and president of our denomination. Now, I'm not saying she's womanist. I don't know, but there are more womanists holding key positions in our world, in various churches and denominations, and yeah, so I just see it. I see expansion, innovation, and creativity when I think of the future of womanism.
I agree. Womanism started in theology. However, in the academy, womanism has spread way past theology and is into all types of fields. And there are people who are identifying womanism in psychology and nursing and so many other fields. And
psychology,
yeah, because people are it's informing thought. I think it's going to expand. Like she said, I think it's going to be some expansion. And how it comes to play out in everyday's life, in people everyday life. I think because we're it's not just going to be a quote unquote academic term, I believe, and because it's more, more people are every day are understanding, because there are people in at the gathering now who understand themselves to be womanists, and understand that their life experiences and things like that. But also I think we're going to see a shift in way people think on certain things is how I see it, as more people understand different things and start to take their own experiences seriously. I think it's also a way of empowering people. So I agree with Irie. I think we'll see some more creativity. You'll see some more expansion, and with all of that, you're going to see more people trying to push back because of the way it's going to impact the world.